Welcome back to the Titanium Hangar. This is Mike. Today I want to talk to you about Super 7 getting into G.I. Joe O-Rings. They've already made these reaction figures, which I like the way they look, but it's kind of strange that they went this route and not the O-Ring, but now they're getting into the O-Ring. First figures we actually see are these Vipers that are an additional add-on pack for the Mothership. Now we're going to talk about the Mothership, but this is all supposed to come around the same time the Mothership arrives. And with that, there's a lot that they can do with this line. We're going to go ahead and get into talking about the possibilities with Super 7 getting into the O-Rings. We're going to talk about kind of what we've already seen and what's failed, and hopefully this is successful. We'll talk about this and more coming up. Of course, kids of the 80s back in the day loved Star Wars. It was huge. It was the biggest toy line going on back in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. Somewhere between 1984 and 1986, kids started dumping Star Wars for something better, something more fun, something more advanced. And that was G.I. Joe. A big part of it was the articulation. That was a huge part of it. You could do so much more with these figures, and then they also came with a ton of accessories, and it was really cool. We also had media every day. You could watch the show and enjoy it, as opposed to Star Wars, which had a movie every 3 years and then nothing for a decade. And with that, I found myself dumping my Star Wars. I actually went with my brother to a Toys R Us in a big city. We had money in our pocket, and I, for a second, was thinking about Star Wars in 1986, still holding on. And when he said G.I. Joe, I completely forgot about Star Wars, and after that, traded them all off. Because this is so important to have this articulation and this advanced articulation and advanced stuff going on with vehicles. Super 7 has received a lot of criticism for their reaction line, for the price point of being $20 for a 5-point of articulation figure, which I think they do look really good, and it is pretty cool, but it is the complete opposite of what we did in the 80s. Dumping Star Wars because they were simplistic 5-point of articulation and they were behind the times, and nowadays they're bringing these out and taking the more articulated figures and action figures and characters and making them look more simplified. I still think they look good, and I'm still happy I bought the ones that I bought, but I'm more excited for O-Ring. I understand it now. Hasbro did give their O-Rings a shot, and they started out by selling them in 2-packs. You had to buy 2. You couldn't just buy one. They were $20 each, and then this set got it up to 22 each, 21 each for a $42 price point. And that was actually kind of cool in a way. You actually got some decent figures in there, and a lot of collectors enjoyed this to a point, but it was an exclusive to their own site, and you could only get them on there. They put a limit of 2. Then when they went on sale, you couldn't even buy more with your own account. There's a lot of issues surrounding it. They used paper thin cardboard. It wasn't cardboard, it was paper. It was really thin, and with that, they failed on this in a lot of ways. They also did their O-Rings with this Sky Striker, which this is another thing. It's a problem with this is you had to buy this set, whether or not you felt like a Sky Striker is worth $200 minimum for the rest of your life, or you just wanted the figures and maybe fans had to sell off parts of it to just get the figures and get rid of the Sky Striker, and that might have worked out for some people, but oddly enough, this was a frustration for a lot of collectors and a lot of collectors that passed on this because they didn't need another Sky Striker. And then we got the Transformer ones, the Transformer crossovers that include figures with them, it's kind of cool, but if you're a Joe collector, you're more or less stuck with a Transformer that you probably don't want. Or if you're a Transformer collector, you're stuck with Joes you don't want. Not everybody is a full crossover collector. And with that, I do see a lot of these, one or the other, sold separately on eBay because you can tell that collector just didn't want that. And I think it's more enjoyable to just buy the figure that you want. If I want a Zartan, I can buy a Zartan. If I want a Zarana, I can buy a Zarana. Not have to buy the whole set. Which brings us to Super 7. Now, the thing about Super 7 doing these O-Rings is that they are saying they're probably going to be about $20. And Brian didn't want to confirm that 100%, but he says the goal is to keep them the same price as the reaction figures. So that was one of the hurdles for Hasbro. If a small company, probably a hundredth of the size of Hasbro, can make these things, pay a license, and make them cheaper than what Hasbro was offering, that is very impressive. I know a lot of people are going to say, no, 20 is too much. It needs to be 15, it needs to be 12, it needs to be whatever. And I would much rather them be cheaper. But I will say, they're making this set of 5 for 75 or 15 each. And then they have the Cobra mothership that's supposed to come out the same time that this line launches. This line is supposed to launch in Q4 of 2024, and that's when they expect to have this out fall of 2024. So with that, this would be a cool launch if this takes off. If the mothership can take off. As you can see, we've got 8 days left, 1 hour and 7 minutes, but by the time you watch this, 7.5 days left, something like that. There are 1,455 backers of the minimum 4,000. Means they're not even going to unlock the cool stuff, probably. Probably won't even, if it does fund, it won't even unlock the trouble bubbles and the cool kind of stuff that's out there. They did add 2 more figures. They took the top tier and just added into the base. Now, they haven't given us guidance on what characters will be first, what's going to be the first wave. All this stuff is still in the works, and I really feel like they literally just got approved from Hasbro to do it. And so now it's sink the money into making the designs, designing the figures, and we'll see something relatively soon, probably sometime in January, about which characters and what they're going to look like, all this stuff. Probably just renders, because that's how they operate. But it's still pretty interesting, exciting that they say they're going to be based off of the cartoon, Deke, and they're going to be discussing some comic stuff that's going on. So there's a lot that they can do with it. But these figures, I have high hopes because I think their reactions look good. And if they look that good and they have O-Ring, we'll see how that goes. Now, this is going to be different than what we've seen from Hasbro. And Super 7, we know what to expect with a really good cardstock. We know what to expect with the packaging looking fantastic. Now, I don't really have anything against the Sky Striker look of the packaging. It's just it was really thin and poorly packed. It was really strange how they packed it. But with that, they also went more for a vintage toy look. Even though it didn't match it exactly or perfectly, it was still targeting the toy look. And we know Super 7 is going to be targeting a cartoon or comic look, so we will not see the same thing. It will look different. It won't match your vintage figures either, and that's okay because it is something different. So if you have vintage figures, your vintage figures are still special, and then when you get the Super 7 ones, they're going to be special for a whole different reason. Also, I do want to point out that there was absolutely nothing retro about the retro collection Hasbro put out at Walmart. That was their first fail. I seem to fail to discuss that one. I want to point that out, and I think Super 7 is going to do a lot better job than this. But I also want to say these figures were priced a lot cheaper than $20. Well, not much. What are they, like 14 each? Now, the cool thing about this is it's going to be compatible with pretty much everything that was vintage. Everything made in the vintage line, everything made like this here was more or less just remaking vintage stuff in a modern era with modern figures to match. But all this is going to match. They already have a design for Trouble Bubble. Whether or not we get the mothership, I think that'll come out later anyway, either way. And with that, it's cohesive for 3.75-inch vintage Joe collectors, O-Ring collectors. And we're going to find out how strong the vintage O-Ring collector really is. Because I actually think that makes up the majority of Joe collectors. But since you're not seeing the O-Ring available at retail and you have to jump through hurdles to get it, they're just kind of dormant right now. Now, Super 7's been known to make big play sets, such as they've made the Snake Mountain, they've made the Cat's Lair, and a lot of people want them to make a modernized version of the Terrordrome and a modernized version of the Flag, and I hear all that. I don't know if that's something that they would do, but they might. I just don't think we need it. I think that you could go get a Terrordrome, and with enough money, with what it's going to cost to get Super 7 to make one, you could get a vintage one. Pretty easy, more for the most part, and you might have to track a few parts down. It might take you a couple of months to just do a little bit of work to track those down for a reasonable price. But for the most part, you can get this. You can get this for probably $500 complete right now, and you can get one incomplete for $300 and $200 worth of parts down the road. But a lot of people seem to want to or clamor for this to happen. But I think Super 7's actually better off making stuff like the Mothership, something we've never, ever seen before. And with that, just go with the vintage, and the figures will work with this. Super 7 also has been known to make stuff that's never been made before. I think that's really the pocket that they live in. And in O-Ring form, we'll see more stuff like this. Now, a lot of people pick this up saying, hey, I'm an O-ring collector, but I don't want 5 POA figures. But this has never been made before, so I will pick this up. It is kind of cool that they do this kind of stuff, but I also want to show this is the style of package they use. It's just very similar to what we saw with the vintage line, and I expect to see if they do any vehicles or any of these specialty sets or anything along those lines, that this is the same way it's going to look, and they're going along a more or less vintage route with a slightly modern adaptation. I also want to say I absolutely love the Super 7 Ultimates line, and I do like it more than Classified, and I still do to this day. With that, they nail the look, the feel of the cartoon, and that starts to make me wonder when they really dig deep and go deep into O-ring figures trying to look like the cartoon more than like the toy. What are they going to look like? I think they're going to look pretty good. It's going to be pretty impressive. I believe it's going to be impressive, but of course, we don't know until we see the first test shots. Another thing is that they like to do the subgroups. I mean, if they're going to invest in the mold, then they're going to do the subgroups too, and I think that's pretty cool that they do that. Some people don't like it. Some people love it. Some people hate it. But I think that the subgroups are cool if they hit target. And I'm going to tell you why. Because there's not a huge demand for the subgroups, and I believe the subgroups like the Python Patrol and the Tiger Force are probably a quarter of the demand for those as there are for the standard figures. Which is why you get something like this, and if at Target they carry these figures, I know it's kind of low res, sorry, but this sale that they have, I mean, I've seen them as cheap as $6 at Target. That's not something that you could have gotten from Hasbro, even though they do like 35% off or something along those lines. Occasionally at a warehouse sale. I know Storm Shadow and the Snake Eyes went on that sale, but Target almost consistently has some sort of a sale, a deal, some 25 off 100, things you can do to get the figures cheaper at retail if you get them into retail. And I believe they're going to be at retail. Brian says they're going to be everywhere reaction figures are now is where the O-ring figures are going to be. And I also want to say that retailers that are getting tired of these clearances and seeing all this stuff are going to look at this as a new SKU, a new toy line, a new product offering, and not as a reaction toy. And even if they're tired of clearancing out reaction toys, then this is something new and different and worth taking a risk on. But I'm curious, guys, what do you guys think about this new O-ring from Super 7? Are you in on this? Are you excited for this? Are you not excited about it at all? I know a lot of people are just classified collectors, but we'll see what O-ring collectors exist and if it generates something new in these classified collectors that want to pick those up too. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and Titanium Hanger out.